Okay, I should be live now. So some of my friends at work had thought that some of the things I say at work I ought to share with other people, I suppose with a wider audience. I honestly I feel like I'm boring to other people. I don't bore myself. I simply adore myself. That's not true. I I suppose the things that I talk about are interesting to me, just not usually interesting to others, but we'll see how it goes. This is a live stream. Obviously, I haven't really invited anybody, and nobody knows I'm doing it, so there really aren't going to be anybody viewing it. But in time, I suppose, I hope some people follow the channel, and then maybe I'll actually get some live feedback and questions from people, and have an actual discussion. But in the meantime, the first discussion is going to be about the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and basically, we're going to discuss some misconceptions that people have, and I'm going to kind of analyze how both sides look at the issue. We're going to also analyze why there's so much disagreement. But let's just jump into it. So obviously, when you talk about the Second Amendment, you've got both the far left and far right. Liberals and conservatives have their own different views about it. What is the Second Amendment? First of all, so uh, I actually hold this up. I can just read it straight off to you. Second Amendment. No. Second Amendment. I had it pulled up. Here we go. I'm back. So, the Second Amendment says a well regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And what does that mean? Well, based on what the Supreme Court has said, and really what the founders meant when they wrote the amendment, it means that you have a personal right to own a firearm. The reason they specified that is that during the Revolution, American Revolution, one of the ways that the British actually went about trying to control the colonies is that they would seize their firearms. This was not illegal at the time, wasn't illegal under British law, and it certainly wasn't illegal in most countries for the government to say, we can take away these people's weapons. Um, After the Revolution, that was one of the things the founders wanted to guarantee that you could always have. So you could always have a weapon. There are misconceptions, like I said, on both sides about what exactly that means. We'll start with the far right. So basically, I'm going to state both of their positions, the far right and the far left, and we'll analyze those. The far left, no, far right. I'm sorry, the far right. What they believe about weapons is you should be able to have weapons anywhere, anytime you want them. That you should that pretty much everybody should have be able to have whatever weapons they want. One of their core beliefs actually is that without weapons, that the basically we essentially what they're arguing is that we become almost like a communist state, and the government could control us because they no longer felt a threat from the people of rebellion. And when you look at the far left, their view on guns and the Second Amendment is that honestly, a lot of them feel like the Second Amendment is outdated. Like the founders could never have envisioned a scenario in which we have the weapons that we have today, and that basically firearms should be very well regulated, and that it should be difficult to purchase them because Honestly, they feel like the availability of them makes it easy for people to go out and commit, horrendous crimes, murder each other, that sort of thing. Both of these sides have their misconceptions. Uh, and I'm going to start with the far right. Obviously, there are places that we're not allowed to have firearms. Courthouse would be one of them. In the courthouse, well, who is responsible for providing your security there? Well, it's the police. The police provide your security in a courthouse, and they're the ones who have the weapons. And just like that, there are other areas where probably it's a good idea for people not to have their own firearms and for the police to be the ones providing security. That is a misconception. Another misconception of theirs, obviously, is the idea that without weaponry, the citizens, would be basically forced into some sort of a communist dictatorship or some sort of a tyrannical government. Maybe not communist, but some sort of a tyrannical government. And that's a misconception as well. That's It's obviously not true. When you look around the world, we have places where guns either aren't allowed at all or they're very hard to obtain, and they're not in any type of dictatorship. They're not communist countries. A lot of them are considerably more towards the left, or at least would be the left in this country, than than we are. But they're not under some sort of evil tyrannical rule. Um, so that's an obvious misconception. When you look at the far left, they have their own misconceptions as well. Um, let's see. Which one do I want to start with? Let's start off with that the founders could never envision us having the type of weapons that we have today. Maybe the exact, they probably couldn't have possibly envisioned exactly what kind of weapons we have today, but it's more than evident that they would have known that the weaponry was going to get better over time, and that eventually we would become honestly better at killing people. That's what we do with guns, with weapons. Um, this would have been evident to them because of where we came from. I mean, just reading through history, they would have known there was a point in time where I mean, we literally ran around with spears to spear each other, and then we developed more effective ways of spearing each other, and then we developed it literally, you can look through the history of warfare and see that we've developed and developed and developed and become more and more efficient. So it is pretty evident to them that future weaponry, future guns would be better than they were at the time. Plus, a lot of them have misconceptions about just what type of guns there were at the time. A lot of them think, for instance, that the only type of weapons that were available that existed were muskets, where it took you minutes and minutes to actually reload them and use a ramrod to ram gunpowder down into the musket. Were those the main types of weapons around at the time? Yeah, they were, but they were more effective guns even at the time. Just weren't widely available, and honestly, they were difficult to make. But anyway, that's really beyond the point. The point of the matter is that they did know that more effective weapons were going to be made because they could see how it used to be, and that more effective weapons had been made all the way up to that point. Um, so that's a misconception. Um, the founding fathers really did feel so when conservatives say that the founding fathers wanted this in place to allow the citizens to be armed against the government, they're not incorrect about that. It's not necessary. We've discovered that in the modern age, it really isn't necessary to be armed against your government if your government, is democratic. but they're not wrong when they say that the founding fathers, that was one of their interests, because it was. It's actually evident when you read things like the Federalist Papers. That's what they were looking at. But moving on from that, I think one of the biggest misconceptions that the far left has about the whole issue is that if we take away everybody's guns, there will be less violence. That's an obvious misconception. It's obvious because when you look at it, first of all, there are literally millions, millions of weapons in the United States. One of the ones they like to talk about a bunch is the AR-15. AR-15, there are over 2 million of them in the US, 2 million. Um, when you look at that, you say to yourself, even if they were to go out and start seizing weapons, seize everyone's guns, they're not going to get all 2 million of those. In fact, they're probably not even going to get most of them. If they get half of them, I would be surprised. Um, that would leave still, a good million of those floating around. Wouldn't exactly be hard to find. Might be expensive, but not hard to find. Um, Also, the other issue really is when you analyze who uses these in mass shootings. I know there's a big concern about preventing school shootings. That obviously with what has recently happened, but you look at who's using those. A lot of times, mentally disturbed people, but generally speaking, mentally disturbed or not, they're criminals. Somebody who wants to go out and murder, 20, 30, 40, 60 people, however many people they want to kill, it's not going to concern them that they're going to have an illegal gun charge on their record in addition to all these murders. That's most of them, honestly, I don't know if they intend to kill themselves. I don't know if they go in with that being their intention. I can't know that, but a lot of them either do end up either killing themselves or getting killed in the process of committing all these murders. So they can't have that much regard for their own lives and for their own safety. Also, not gonna obviously not gonna have that much of a regard for the law in general. So telling them they can't own a weapon really isn't going to do anything. They're still going to go find weapons. Honestly, the most devastating weapons that exist are improvised. We've seen that in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Improvised weapons, they're honestly even more devastating than traditional weapons. But I don't really think that banning a certain type of weapon or banning weapons in general, guns in general, would particularly lower the amount of mass shootings, or just mass deaths that we have in the United States. I think one of the real questions that people ought to be asking about this, and I'm going to kind of take this in and look at this from the middle now. No, because honestly, I'm very moderate in my own political views. I'm probably right of center more so than left of center, but I'm pretty moderate in my views. Um, the real question you have to ask is why is this happening? Why is it happening now? Um, it's not like high capacity magazines. It's not as if automatic weapons, it's not like these are new things. Um, when you look back in time, obviously during the Reagan administration, they did sign an assault weapons ban, and how much that helped, I can't really, say. The issue really with that is that eventually the ban expired and was not renewed, and so now we've got plenty of assault weapons out there, and you're never going to get them all. It's just not going to happen. But prior to the 80s, these weapons were available then too. And probably weren't quite as effective as the ones that we have now, but they still existed and they were still capable of killing, hundreds of people at a time if necessary. Well, I suppose I shouldn't say necessary, but I suppose if you wanted to. But I mean, you look at things like AK-47. AK-47 has been around, I believe, since the 50s. I actually can look real quick and see when it was invented. When was the AK-47 invented? Might have actually been the 40s. It was actually designed in the 40s. Russian rifle designed in 1947 and first used in 1949. So when you look at that, by the 80s, that had been around for a long time, probably not necessarily widely available, and that's another argument we'll get to in a minute. But as far as did they exist, they did exist. Lots of weaponry existed. Lots of people had weapons. Probably, from what I've read, actually, I would say, generally speaking, a greater percentage of the population used to own weapons or used to own guns than does now. But there are actually more guns now than there were then, and that's for several reasons. Obviously, we've got a higher population now than we used to have, and the other issue is that a lot of people own multiple guns. In fact, whole gun collections, where this wasn't exactly common. 50, 60 years ago, every family might have owned. Well, not every family, but a lot of families would have owned like maybe one or two weapons, and that was it. So the question that you'd have to ask yourself is, why didn't we get mass shootings back then? We actually had a greater percentage of the population that owned weapons, had weapons available. Why didn't we have all these mass shootings back then? Uh, Honestly, I can't really give you a straightforward answer because I don't feel that the appropriate research has been done on the issue. And I don't feel the appropriate research has been done because we keep having to put up with the BS from both sides on the issue. Where one side where basically we get, on the right that there is no problem, and we get from the left that we should pretty much ban all guns. Uh, that's why they have so much trouble actually coming to any type of a compromise, because when you look at the issue as there's no problem, or uh, you know the other side is ban all guns, there's really not much room to come together on that. There is no compromise between all weapons need to be banned and we there's not a problem. But moving further with some of the misconceptions on the left, that the availability of weapons is what causes there to be all these mass shootings. Honestly, when you look at the availability of weapons in the United States, one of the things that you're going to be struck by very quickly is how available guns are in this country. They are very available. It is easy to get a gun. A lot of people have guns. If I wanted to, I could probably get a gun week, maybe more, but not. It wouldn't take me long to acquire one. Um, so the question that you have to ask yourself on that is, if it's so easy, if there are so many guns out there, it's so easy to get them. Honestly, why aren't there more mass shootings? There really ought to be with that many weapons available. Um, the main issue there is that it can't be the availability of the guns. They like we said earlier, more families used to have guns than do now. there are actually less people, less percentage of the population that owns at least one gun than there used to be. And so the availability, all the weapons that are out there, they're not what's causing the problem. Again, like I said, I can't know exactly what's causing the problem, but I do have my own opinion and ideas about what's causing the problem. My thought on it is that the main issue is probably mental health. We've seen a steady increase in the amount of. I can't really say we've seen a steady increase um, in mass shootings because there actually used to be far more mass shootings, but when you look at it, what we've seen is kind of an increase in these really surprising, very disturbing mass shootings. Whereas, you know, in the 80s and even prior to that, gang activity, things like that, those were primarily responsible for all the mass shootings, and those still are primarily responsible for most of the mass shootings. But you didn't see in the 50s and 60s, you didn't see people going in and shooting up schools and things like that. Why has this happened? Um, there actually are very few people who get committed anymore. When people are dangerous these days, we've kind of developed into a pill society. There's a pill for everything. And if we can't fix you easily with a pill, there's really not a lot to do for you anymore. Um, we only commit people if, they're very obviously they can't function in society. Um, but there used to be a point in time where somebody would get committed just for a little while, just to see if, they're really as crazy as we thought they might be. And we don't really do that anymore. I really feel as though our mental health system has almost fallen apart. Um, I understand why a lot of what they used to call them, mental health hospitals, sanitariums, basically, is what they were. Why a lot of those got closed down. They used to, honestly, a lot of them were very abusive to the mentally ill, and so over time and through attrition, most of them have been shut down. There really are very few places where somebody can be committed, either for short term or long term anymore. And the issue that you run into with that is, like I've said before, we live in a pill society. There are some people who just can't be fixed with a pill. It takes more than that. And there are some people that really should be committed at least short term to determine just how crazy they are because they are pretty crazy. Um, so honestly, rebuilding our mental health system would be the place to start if you want to lower the amount of mass shootings. From my perspective, I've said I'm very much middle of the road. I have no problem with states requiring that if you want to purchase a particular kind of weapon, say an assault rifle, whatever, that you first have to go and have a mental evaluation to determine if you're a nutcase. To me, that'd be a great idea. Have somebody sign off on it first before we allow you to own that type of a weapon. And honestly, maybe just to own a weapon in general, you have to have a psych evaluation. But also with that, I had heard about recently what the governor of Florida was doing for the mass shootings. Um, a lot of things he suggested are actually really good ideas, especially having where somebody can be banned short term from getting a weapon, and that can be done by the police or can be done by mental health professionals. That's a good idea. I had it's actually kind of disgusting what I read. I read people's comments on some of those stories, and I have to say that a lot of people out there just disgust me with their opinions because one of the things I look at it, I before he made those suggestions, I saw liberal after liberal after liberal saying, "Why don't you at least do this?" And then he did, and what I read was from a lot of people was, "Oh, that's too little, too late. Oh, he's just doing this because he's under tremendous pressure to do it. You know, oh, look at all those students who are out there protesting. They won. They forced him to do this." What the heck is wrong with some of you people out there? I mean, is this really what you feel? Because you asked for him to do something, he did it, and you're still complaining. What sense does that make to anybody? That doesn't make any sense to me. Um, Honestly, you should be jumping up and down that he finally did what you wanted him to do. Uh, does that mean that he wasn't under pressure to do it? I'm sure he's under plenty of pressure to do it. But regardless of whether or not people went out there and protested, it's not like he wasn't going to be under pressure to do something. Um, and it's not like even if people hadn't have protested and didn't come out and say time to make changes to gun laws, blah blah blah. He's it. Do you think that he went home that night and said, "Oh, a bunch of kids got shot. No big deal"? I'm sure he didn't do that. I seriously doubt he did that. Um, a lot of people look at it, oh, well, all these politicians are owned by the NRA. I seriously doubt that the NRA gave him even a tenth of his campaign financing, or anybody else for that matter. Um, they may have given him some money. Maybe he felt he owed them something, but these are just ridiculous. What I get from you know people out there, or these comments that people want to make. Um, I honestly, if I was in his position, I would want to do something. I would want to do something that was the most appropriate to do. Um, like I said, I'm not really far right. He's probably more far right than I am. I would imagine he is, but uh, you got to consider not everybody agrees with the far left. There are plenty of people here that are on the far right or that are more middle of the line and didn't want to see either assault weapons banned or just guns banned in general. I just don't get some of the people out there that feel like they sit there and they demand these certain things and they get the things that they want and they're still pissed off. What are you pissed off about? You're pissed off because a bunch of people got shot? Well, I don't like it either, but I'm not pissed off because somebody did something about it. Uh, I mean, honestly, I just don't know what some of y'all expect. Eh, I mean, do you expect to? Did you want him to go out and say, "Okay, I feel like I should have done this years ago. I was wrong not to." Would that have helped it? I mean, honestly, I'm asking. Do you feel like that would have helped you to feel better about it? But in the end, it doesn't really matter. The point is, you wanted more weapon restrictions. You got them. Will this prevent the next mass shooting? I can't really give you an answer to that. I've already told you previously in this stream that I don't really feel like it would. Honestly, I doubt it'd have that much of an effect. Somebody who's nutcase enough to go in and shoot up a school is going to be just as nutcase enough to make an improvised explosive device, a bomb vest, whatever it is they're going to make, and go kill a bunch of kids. They're just terrible people. Um, we really, honestly, like I've said, the whole thing here should be about mental health, about identifying those types of people and getting them off the streets. Um, One of the things that I have thought might actually help is we have a suicide hotline, and that's great. I applaud that we're finally doing that. But one of the things we don't have these days is who do you call if you feel like you might hurt others, not yourself? You know, if you think that you're going nuts, who do you call? Um, Despite Congress's efforts over the past decade or so, we still don't have everybody with health insurance. And some people who actually used to have health insurance don't have it anymore, mainly because honestly, it's because and that's a topic for another video, but it's because of this hyper partisanship that we have. It's just bull crap. But anyways, there's still people out there who don't have ready access to medical care, including psychiatric care. I suppose you go into any hospital and say, I think I'm going to kill a bunch of people. They're probably going to do something. But uh, again, I've said before, pill society, pill society. What are they going to do? They're going to give you some pills. They're going to tell you, make sure you take these pills. And then they're probably eventually going to let you go. Why are they going to let you go? Because it's expensive to keep you. If they really think that you're a credible threat, they might pass you along to the police, maybe. But honestly, they may not. Whatever's wrong with you might be able to be fixed by a pill. But who's going to make sure you keep taking those pills? Your parents? Maybe. What if you don't have parents? This last kid didn't. He had, his I think it was like adopted parents or something like that. But honestly, when you look at that, yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't. Don't get me wrong. This is nothing against them. I'm sure they didn't want him to do this. I sure if they had seen any signs that he was going to do something like this, they would have tried to stop him. But they're not his parents, and he can't be the only one in that situation. There've got to be plenty of others. Um, who's going to make sure you take those medications? Make sure that you're still good. Who's looking after your mental health? Um, we should have a hotline, just like we do for the suicide hotline. A hotline where you say, I think I'm going to hurt other people. I don't see how that could possibly harm anything. If we had a hotline where people could self-report themselves that they thought they might harm other people, and then maybe we could get some resources available for them to actually get some friggin' help. You know, maybe we could even allow them to self-commit themselves. Does that mean that everybody would? I'm sure it doesn't mean that everybody would. If everybody out there who wanted to do something like this was willing to tell on themselves, I'm sure we'd have far less shootings anyway because somebody would do something. But I think that's a resource that should be available to them. Um, and then beyond that, just a better mental health care system in general. Places where people can be put away if, they're dangerous to society. So I've rambled on here for a good long while. It's essentially the same sort of stuff I do at work. So, questions, comments, anything, just let me know what you're wondering about or what you think about it. I do ask that you be respectful. I don't feel like I'm being disrespectful to anybody. Although if you do feel I've been disrespectful, let me know because I do strive, at least personally, to try not to disrespect people. Um, but yeah, nothing disrespectful, just questions and comments. I don't want to hear stuff about how I'm an idiot or whatever. Like I said, if you think I'm wrong about things, tell me why that you think I'm wrong and why you think I'm wrong. But um, yeah, just like I said, respectful comments. Absolutely won't tolerate racist comments. I will get rid of them. Sexist comments. Just general, crap that you get from trolls. I'll get rid of it, man. I have no problem with that. Yeah, let me know. Peace out.